that got me, though, like dry leaves scraping the ground, like something rotten was waiting to come out. This all happened when I was young, maybe 13. I grew up in a small village in Nigeria, nestled between fields of crops and a thick forest that everyone warned us to stay away from. And if the forest was feared, Prince Abasi was feared even more. Prince Abasi was our ruler's son, but he was nothing like a fair prince from a storybook. People called him the wicked prince behind his back. Some said he had a curse, others that he practiced dark magic, but no one could say why for certain. Only that he didn't go to our village, and we were told to stay far from the palace grounds. But at night, the elders would tell stories about people who went missing and say it was the prince who took them. When I was little, I thought it was just a story to scare us from sneaking out. But then, one evening, my cousin Kofi and I decided we'd prove that all wrong. It was one of those dry, hot nights. The village was quiet, everyone was already inside their homes. Kofi and I were down by the river, catching fireflies and talking about the prince's latest appearance. Rumor was he'd been spotted near the big baobab tree by the forest. Kofi leaned close to me and said, "You know, Abasi only shows up when he needs something." "Like what?" I asked, curious but also nervous. He lowered his voice. "They say he takes people. The ones that are too curious, who wander too close." "You're just trying to scare me," I said, laughing it off, but my skin crawled anyway. Kofi grinned mischievously. "What if we went to the baobab tree? See if he's there." I laughed, trying to act bravely, but I could feel my heart pounding. "All right, let's go. You first." So we snuck through the shadows, weaving past huts and animals that were asleep for the night. The baobab tree stood tall and ancient at the edge of the village, with its twisted branches reaching toward the sky. It was said to be hundreds of years old and was the very place where most people claimed to see Prince Abasi. As we reached the tree, we sat down, peering into the thick woods. The night was quiet, too quiet. Kofi leaned close, whispering, "What do you think the prince would want with people, anyway?" "I don't know," I replied, glancing around nervously. "Maybe they're just stories." Just then, we heard a soft crunch behind us, footsteps. Slow, steady, coming closer. My breath caught in my throat. We whipped around, Kofi raising our small lantern, its faint light casting eerie shadows around us. And there he was. Prince Abasi. Standing just a few paces away, half hidden in the darkness. I still remember how he looked. His eyes were so dark they seemed like empty holes, and his face was blank, like a mask. But he smiled, a crooked, twisted smile that made my skin crawl. "What are you doing here?" he asked in a voice that was soft, almost polite, but heavy like each word carried a hidden threat. We were just looking at the stars," I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. But he didn't look convinced. His eyes narrowed. "Children shouldn't be wandering alone at night. There are dangers in this forest." Kofi tried to sound brave. "We are not afraid. We are just curious." The prince's expression changed, his smile widening, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Oh, curious, are you?" He looked between us, his gaze lingering on me. "Curiosity is dangerous." And then, without another word, he turned and started walking toward the forest. I should have run. Every part of me was screaming to get away. But I couldn't move. Kofi nudged me, whispering, "He wants us to follow. Should we?" I didn't want to, but I knew that refusing him wasn't an option. The prince's word was law. So, we followed him. We walked into the forest, past the thick trees and undergrowth. With each step, the air grew colder, and the sounds of the night faded. I could barely hear Kofi's breathing beside me. Prince Abasi moved ahead like a shadow, gliding through the trees as if he belonged there. Finally, we came to a clearing. In the center was a circle of stones, arranged in a strange pattern. Inside the circle was a mound covered with bones and dry leaves. I felt a chill run down my spine, and I noticed Kofi was shivering too. "Sit," Prince Abasi commanded, pointing to the ground in the circle. We hesitated, but his gaze was so intense, so unnatural, that we obeyed, sitting down on the cold, hard ground. I could feel the sharp edges of small bones under my legs. Prince Abasi looked down at us with a dark satisfaction, like he'd trapped us. He began to chant, his voice low and rough. The words were strange, like nothing I'd ever heard, and they seemed to echo, bouncing off the trees and the stones. As he chanted, I felt a heavy pressure in my chest, like something was squeezing my lungs. I glanced down at the stones around us and noticed more carvings, like faces twisted in pain. Faces that looked far too real. Faces that looked familiar. Kofi noticed them too and whispered, "They're people." I could barely breathe. These were the missing people from our village, transformed into stone, trapped here forever. Prince Abasi stopped chanting and looked at us, his eyes glinting with something dark and unholy. "You came here out of curiosity," he said. "Now you've seen what lies beyond." He knelt close to us, his breath cold against my face. "Tell no one, or you'll join them." He gestured at the stones around us, his twisted smile returning. "The spirits need friends." Kofi and I didn't wait for him to say more. We scrambled to our feet and ran as fast as we could, branches scratching our faces and legs as we bolted through the forest. Behind us, I could hear Prince Abasi's laugh echoing through the trees, a sound that was half human, half something else. When we reached the village, we hid in my house, too terrified to speak. No one believed us when we tried to tell them what happened. They just shook their heads, saying we had let our imaginations get the best of us. But we knew what we'd seen was real. Months passed, and we tried to forget. But the memory of that night never left us. I would lie awake at night, staring out my window, half expecting to see his empty eyes staring back. Kofi and I barely spoke about it, but we both knew what we'd seen, what we had barely escaped. Then, one day, a new family moved into the village. They didn't know the stories, and their little boy, Tond, loved exploring the fields and woods, just like we had. One evening, Tond didn't come home. His parents searched everywhere, but he was gone, just like the others. No one wanted to believe it, but I knew what had happened. The prince had taken him, just as he tried to take us. I felt guilty, as if staying silent had cost Tond his life. Years went by. I moved away, and left the village, trying to escape the nightmares that haunted me. But now and then, I'd hear something, a laugh, faint but familiar, scratching at the edges of my mind. And every time, I'd remember the prince's last words to us, *, the spirits need friends. *. Even now, I sometimes wake in the middle of the night, my heart racing, with that twisted smile and empty eyes staring back at me in my dreams. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I can still hear that laugh echoing in the distance like dry leaves scraping the ground. I've learned to never speak of that night again. But I can feel him out there, still watching, waiting for his next friend to join him in the shadows.